29-year-old Johnny Coxie and his wife, 25-year-old Megan Coxie, were living in a low-income section of Spartanburg, South Carolina. They both often found themselves out on the streets begging for money. Child Protective Services stepped in and took their child away from them. Almost immediately after their child was taken from them, both Megan and Johnny were arrested and thrown in jail. After they both got out of jail, Megan was contacted by a local, very successful real estate agent named Todd Kohlhepp. Todd was reaching out to her to offer her and her husband pretty decent paying jobs. Apparently, Todd had recently purchased this massive 95-acre plot of land in the area, and he needed people to come onto the property and help clean it up. And so, of course, Megan and Johnny say yes. She and Johnny made their way out to this property. 3 days later, Megan's mother tried to get in touch with her, but she couldn't. And when she reached out to Johnny, she couldn't get in touch with him either. And so given the couple's history, Megan's mother thought the worst. She panics and she rushes to Megan and Johnny's house. They're not there. And so something in her gut tells her that something is wrong here. And so she called the police. The police began their investigation by speaking to Todd Kohlhepp, who was the owner of this property, because presumably he was one of the last people to see them before they went missing. But when they spoke to Todd, he said, look, I had limited interaction with them. They were on my property. They came out, they cleaned these two buildings, and then I paid them and they left. And we haven't had any contact since. And so at this point, the police decide their best bet is just to wait and see what happens. Months went by, and it wasn't long before the case went cold. But it would not stay cold for very long. On August 31st, 2016, two more residents of Spartanburg went missing as well. They were 30-year-old Kayla Brown and her boyfriend, 32-year-old Charlie Carver. Unlike the Coxies, Kayla and Charlie were not struggling with financial issues. They were actually pretty well off. According to their families, it seemed like the couple was very happy with their lives and the directions they were going. But starting on the evening of August 31st, Kayla and Charlie stopped returning text messages or answering phone calls. Charlie's father was especially close with Charlie, and so this sudden silence was immediately noticed by him. Charlie's father finally hopped in his car and drove to his son's house to see if he was there, and he wasn't. And then he drove to Kayla's place, and she wasn't there either. And so he called the police and he reported them missing. The police started with absolutely no leads, and so what they did to begin their investigation was basically just to interview everybody in Charlie and Kayla's life. But no one had any idea where this couple had gone to. But 2 months after they had been reported missing, the police finally obtained a search warrant that would allow them to look at their respective cell phone records. And when they looked at Kayla's cell phone records, they were able to triangulate roughly where her last known location was, according to pings her cell phone was sending off to nearby cell phone towers. And they discovered her last known location was inside of the same 95-acre plot of land that the Coxies had been in before they went missing. And so immediately the police put in for a search warrant to go search this 95-acre property, and they sent a team actually out to the property and just waited for the search warrant to clear. And at the same time, another group of police officers went to Todd Kohlhepp's house. Todd is obviously caught off guard. And so he says to them, look, I know how this looks, but I gotta tell you, I did hire Kayla and her boyfriend did come along with her. She went onto my property. She did some work for me, and then I paid them, and then they left. That is the last I saw of them. I have no idea why her phone would be on my property. The other team that was outside of the 95-acre property, they found out their search warrant had been granted, and so they flew through the gate. They got on that access road, and as they're driving, they pull out their maps they had printed out, and it looked like the last spot was inside of a clearing. And when they pull into the clearing, off to the left side of the road are these two green buildings. The left building was like a shed, and then right next to it on the right was this metal shipping container, and it had all these metal chains and 5 padlocks keeping it shut. And so right away, the police went inside of the left building, the shack, because it was easier to get into. And when they got inside, there really was nothing of note. Kayla was not in there. Charlie was not in there. There was no cell phone in there. It was just gardening tools. And so they went over to the right building, the shipping container, and they got out their metal cutting saws and their bolt cutters, and they began cutting into all of these locks and chains. And when they finally got that door open, they were absolutely astounded at what they saw. The police had just discovered Kayla. She was in rough shape, but she was alive. And after they cut her free and got her out of the shipping container, she told them what happened. Back on August 31st, 2016, Kayla says she was contacted by a friend of hers, Todd Kohlhepp, and he told her that he was still looking for people to come out and help clean up the property. And so Kayla, she was looking for work, and so she agreed to do it. And after getting this job, Kayla would tell Charlie, and Charlie, just being a good boyfriend, said, you know what, I'll tag along with you and I'll help you do this job. I won't ask Todd for any money. I'm just gonna go and help you. And so later that day, she and Charlie, they made their way out to the 95-acre property, and after driving for several minutes, they reach this clearing, and in this clearing, they see Todd up ahead on the left. He's smiling and waving at them, and he's standing in front of the shack and the metal shipping container, and as soon as the couple is standing in front of Todd, Todd just casually pulls out a gun, and as soon as Charlie falls to the ground, Todd aims the gun at Kayla and says, if you go anywhere, I will kill you and I will kill your family. And then he put the gun away, walked over to Charlie, and he wrapped him up in a blue tarp, and then he carried his lifeless body and dumped him in the nearby bucket of a tractor. And then Todd just walked back over to Kayla, who's witnessed this entire thing. She is so terrified she can't even move, and she's just staring at Todd, and Todd draws his gun again at her and orders her to go into the shipping container. So he brings her inside, he locks her up, and for 65 days, she would remain his prisoner. And he told her at the outset that if she ever tried to resist him in any way and didn't do whatever he wanted with her, he would not only kill her, he would also kill her family. And so Kayla very early on decided she would not put up a fight. She just kind of accepted that this was her life, that she would be horribly mistreated, and then probably at some point he would grow tired of her and kill her, but at least she would be sparing her family. And so when the police finally went into that shipping container, Kayla truly did not expect ever to be rescued. That was someone who believed she was 100% going to die inside of that space. And so after Kayla tells the police officers this totally horrible and traumatic story, they immediately radio over to the other team of police officers that were still at Todd Kohlhepp's residence. And they tell them, hey, this is what Kayla just told us.
We have Kayla in your property. She was locked in a container, okay? She has told us that you shot and killed Charlie. Why did you shoot him?
I didn't shoot anybody, sir.
Okay, why did you lock her in a container in your property?
I was talking.
She's on your property right now, locked in a container. She's saying you buried Charlie's body on that property.
No, sir.
So you're saying you didn't lock her up, you didn't put her in the Connex box or anything?
No, sir. I'm money than attorney.
Probably a good thing. Go ahead and put him in the back of your car.
Even though Todd would initially deny any wrongdoing, he would eventually confess, not only to killing Charlie and kidnapping Kayla, but also to killing Johnny and Megan Coxie. Apparently, he had done to them what he did to Kayla and Charlie. Now, unlike Kayla, who would ultimately comply, and it did save her life, Megan did not. She fought back. She was totally resistant. She wouldn't do anything that he wanted her to do. And so after only 5 days of her being in captivity, he would kill her. And the way he would describe her was, oh, you know, she was acting like a wild animal, so I had to put a bullet in the back of her head. He didn't care at all about these people he had killed. Charlie, Johnny, and Megan's bodies would all be discovered in shallow graves right outside of that shipping container. Knowing he was potentially facing the death penalty and wanting to avoid that, Todd told police that he could actually confess to even more murders, and if he did, could they take the death penalty off the table? And so the police ultimately would agree, and Todd would tell them that back in 2003, he had walked into a motorbike shop and killed 4 of their staff members. Apparently, a couple of days earlier, they had offended him in some way. They had kind of made some snide remark about how he was bad at riding motorcycles. It was kind of in good fun. It was not meant to be very mean, but Todd had taken it as an absolute offense and he could not stand for it. And so literally in broad daylight, he had walked back into this store and gunned all of them down. And then once they were all down, he had walked by each of them and put an additional round into each of their heads. And so as Todd is telling the police this terrible story, he's totally nonchalant about it. He's laughing about it, and he's even bragging to police that they would be proud of him at how quickly he cleared the superbike shop, meaning how quickly he got in there and killed everyone inside. That somehow, because police officers use weapons too, they would appreciate how efficient he was. These 4 murders would be the only additional murders Todd would confess to, and they would be enough to take the death penalty off the table. But it's believed Todd had killed more people. In fact, he had blatantly admitted to Kayla when she was in captivity that his body count was in the high 2 digits. And most likely he was telling her this because he planned on killing her before she could ever escape and tell anyone. One of the more disturbing aspects of this case is after it became public that Todd Kohlhepp was the killer, someone discovered that an anonymous account was doing all these product reviews on Amazon, and this anonymous account was Todd Kohlhepp. And the products he was reviewing were things like knives and shovels and chainsaws, and the reviews literally were about how he planned on using these tools to kill people, or they were how he had used these tools to kill people, or how he had disposed of bodies. And then there was also a couple of reviews of padlocks, and one of the reviews said he had 5 of them on a shipping container, and so now the shipping container was just like Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Todd was ultimately sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences, which means he'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Just know that I really appreciate your support, and until next time, that's going to do it. See ya.